Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting and thought-provoking episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. You know, I created this podcast years ago because of the amount of conversations I was having with others or even with myself, or messages I was giving from my pulpit, or articles I was writing for a local newspaper. And I found that I had all of these things that I wanted to say, and I had these great platforms for saying them. The podcast is one of my favorite platforms for that. But I was just thinking recently, this isn't performance or entertainment for me, that I'm just thinking out loud in a very public forum, that I'm sharing my concerns, my deepest fears, my great joys, my relationships, my wisdom with this nation and with the nations as people listen around the world. And I just want to let our listeners know that this isn't what I do, or this isn't merely how I talk when my words are being recorded. That many times you're listening to things that have been recorded and played back that I think about and I think very deeply about. And so I want you to know that Black Like Me is not merely my programming, but it's my life. It's how I live my life. It's how I navigate my world. And I found that it is very therapeutic, if not healing, for me to be able to just have these places where I'm very frank, very raw, whether it's a rant or whether it's just thinking out loud to myself, or whether it's my take on things. It's a way of taking my thoughts and concepts and making them more broadly accessible for people. My engineers are going to hate that I'm about to state this. The quality of what I'm recording right now might not be up to par with what we normally do with our Black Like Me studios, because I never know when ideas are going to hit me, and I can't always wait until I get to the Black Like Me podcast studio. So today I'm just using some mobile equipment just to capture some of the thoughts and feelings of where I am today. Are you familiar with the concept of dine and ditch? It's where you go to a nice restaurant, you sit down and you eat, and then you sneak out without paying. It's called dining and ditching, because you dine and then you ditch the bill, and you hurt a very hardworking server who's on their feet all day trying to make a living. I want to talk about partnering in race. I want to talk about white allyship or non-black allyship through the lens of dining and ditching. When you dine and then ditch, it's not like you go outside and regurgitate the food. It's not bulimia. You eat a meal, you enjoy it, you just stick someone else with the bill, and you don't have the decency, or the person who does this doesn't have the decency to at least pay. Someone grew food, someone prepared food, someone slaughtered animals, someone processed it and transported it and froze it and then unpacked it and then cooked it and then put it on a nice plate and served it to you with a garnished tray. And there's not the decency to appreciate all that has gone into that meal, that you haven't just slighted the server, but all of the people in that chain that have helped to make that happen. I've been thinking a lot lately about particularly my white allies. I won't talk about non-black allies in a broader sense today. That's probably a good opportunity. That's probably a good episode down the road. But right now, I just want to take a moment to just talk about my friends and my white allies, or people who would be white allies, to think about privilege and power and access through the lens of dining and ditching. if you convince yourself that you didn't eat a meal, that there was no meal, I did not go in that restaurant. I did not eat. I was not there. I just sat there and had a glass of water. So I had no obligation to pay. But when you know you've eaten, when you know that you've eaten well, you're not ditching because the food wasn't good. You're just ditching because you didn't want to pay for it. It's given me this thought that when I talk to my white friends and coworkers and well-meaning people, I think that they think that we want white people to denounce everything you have, or we want to inundate you with a sense of guilt that what you have come to know, the rights you have gotten, the ability to have had hundreds of years of slates of candidates who look like you, think like you, vote like you, and protect people who look like you, that somehow we want that to stop, and we want you to give that all back to us. Nothing can be further from the truth for me. What I really want white allies to think about is you have dined sufficiently in America. I know many of you think your grandparents came here, didn't speak the language, and enjoyed the good life. If you listen to my shows, you understand some of the truth behind that history. I won't even waste your time or exert the energy trying to convince people of how ripe America was to allow European folks, European Americans, or European folks who weren't Americans yet, who perhaps had the thought or the notion of becoming Americans, how they were just given access to so many things, including voting and owning land and creating wealth and being able to vote or benefited from voting. And now they're just ditching. They've had the meal, they've enjoyed it, they've had access to the restaurants. Either they don't want to wash dishes because of what they've gotten, or don't want the burden to be burdened down with the reality of how life has just been served up for you. And so people tend to just take a seat and take a hiatus without really thinking about what's my responsibility in making and creating a more equitable society. By using the analogy of dining and ditching, I want to help my white listeners to understand that I'm not trying to make you go back and repay all the benefits that's been afforded the white community in America. But I just want people who really are serious about being allies is to understand it. Is to know that this is real. I just want people to understand this is really how we got here. And part of what can be done, in my opinion, to help things along, not really rectify things, but the payment, if you will, that can happen is by simply acknowledging this has been a benefit, and here's what I'm going to do to really help to live out my remorse or my restitution, if you will, to the best of my abilities. And so I want to talk about some things that white allies can do during these highly volatile moments, during the continued reporting of atrocities against black people, crimes against black people, laws against black people, hiring practices against black people, home ownership issues against black people. I want to offer my friends, my would-be white allies, 5 things that I believe that you can do to really help these issues along and to help us to live more equitably as a society. And so I want to talk about a few of these things. I'm noticing as I just walk through life myself, or as I talk with my black colleagues and family members and friends, we are experiencing an all-time high level of anxiety, weariness, dread, by just being inundated with messages and images of hatred and racism. Like, this is very real, and we don't go looking for them. We really don't go looking for them. And so many times people just want to know, what can I do to be helpful? These are some pointers I want to leave my white friends for you to consider, and things that I would love for you to find how to put into your practice. Listen, No, I don't mean like listen because I'm about to say something. I want you to listen. Check in. If you really have, now this works if you already have cross-cultural relationships. I don't think that you can use this with people that you don't know. In fact, I would not encourage you to use this with people you don't know. But I would say if you have friends who are black and you know that they think deeply about these things, one, because they experienced them, but either part of their work or their life or part of their conversation is that they are very aware of these things and they wrestle with these things. Check in on them and then state your proximity and mean it. One of the things that happened recently after the shooting in Buffalo, so I was working with a group of allies, a group of friends who are helping me work on this major project of building a center for Black excellence in culture in our community. You can go to theblackcenter.org to find out more about this work. I'll be doing some episodes about this in the future. But the Monday after this occurred, no one asked or brought up in like our update meeting, fundraising meeting, about what the impact of those murders were on me as a Black leader and influencer. But 2 people sent private messages to me on the Zoom, and then another called me afterwards saying, "You seem off. You don't seem like yourself." Now, I'm not blaming my friends for not associating the two. But it's very interesting that they knew something was wrong with me, but they had no idea that something that's so far away could be impacting me in Wisconsin. But when they found out that that's what was going on with me, those friends listened. And they knew that they could do more, do better than saying, "What can I do?" You know, they checked in on me. Hey, now that I know that this is what's going on, do you need to talk? Or I'm here. That's what I mean by proximity. I'm here if you need me. And don't just say that and not mean it. But that means, hey, if you need a drink, I'm here. If you need to just vent, I'm here. If you just need to go off, I'm here. If you just need to cuss, I'm here. If you need to cry, I'm here. But what you can do for your Black friends and family members is to just listen. And it doesn't necessarily mean calling them up after something atrocious happens and say, "Hey, I just saw this on the news. Do you want to talk about it?" Because many times that's not what people really need. I recently had a discussion with a friend who was encouraging me to go into greater detail when they reach out to me, in making me aware that they are more aware that all this shit is hitting the fan. But when this stuff first hits the fan, I don't want to talk about it because I'm trying to get my head together. How angry do I want to be? How mad do I want to be? How hurt do I want to be? How do I get back to myself and to the work that I've got to do if I really feel the deep burn of this? But when they open the door, "Hey, you don't look like yourself. You were really quiet in that meeting," or normally you're more effervescent in our staff meetings. Are you okay? Man, the news, or just there's this other shooting or there's this other issue. If you know the person, you know how to get them to say more, or at least make them aware that you are there if they want or need to say more. You could say, if they do open up a little bit, because what we often do is try to close it down because, one, it's a rabbit trail and we don't know how far it goes. And so when we start talking, it starts touching other pain. Then it becomes sort of and another thing and another thing and another thing. And that's how we get the reputation of being angry, because pain is aggregate. And once you begin talking about this particular situation, it makes you remember another situation. And so we might open the door just a little bit, and you might be able to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm available if you want to grab a drink after work," or "Hey, I've got this small meeting, but let me postpone it because I'd love to get together with you, or go grab lunch with you, just let you process or just talk out loud if you want to do it." Those things work when you have friendships and that are cross culture. If you're white and you have friendships, or non-Black, you have friendships with Black folks. These things help. And these are things that you can do. This is one thing that you can do when you have those cross-cultural relationships. Listen, check in, and state your proximity. I'm here if you need me, and mean it. Second thing is the lack of uninformed white friends who are often like deer in the headlights, and I don't mean this pejoratively. I'm saying this as a description. As all of this stuff happens, I see my white friends just thinking, crap, I didn't know the world was like this. We want to blame it on Trump. We want to blame it on the Republicans. We want to blame it on rural whites. This has been America. And can I just be honest for just a moment? When Democrats are in the White House, this shit happens. And when Republicans are in the White House, this shit happens. So please, folks, let's not insult the pain of black people who are being assaulted by injustice. And let's not give a free spin to the other party because you think that there is a more open, woke, and sensitive party. You know, we've been bouncing back and forth between Republican and Democrats for what, over 200 years, and we still have the worst racism we've ever had, which means neither party has been truly committed to eradicating that. Did you hear what I said? That neither party has been truly committed to putting this to rest, because there are policies, practices, and rules and benefits and incentives that can happen to really downplay the manifestation of racism, if not the very attitude and spirit of it. And so the lack of uninformed white friends who are like these deer in the headlights who don't know what to do, and some have even drunk a little bit of the Kool-Aid. Some of you have even drunk a little bit of the Kool-Aid. Well, you know, but our families are more intact, and there's just so many dads that are not in their kids' lives, and there's so many baby mamas. I'm hearing white people say this. His baby mama. I can't believe people say this to me. And what happens is, some of these friends, so they don't know what's real, what's racism. Like, hasn't this just been earned? And so you just got to be more woke to just understand the situation. But what I'm also noticing is that many of my white friends, they want to really call out the stagnation of a political party, the stagnation of their bosses, the stagnation of their pastors or rabbis, the stagnation of city and local government and school boards, without duly addressing their own stagnation. And so they're feeling so sadly and grossly wrong that these wrongs happen, but they are unwilling to engage the work personally to be a part of the change. And so the other thing that is very important to do is just take a look at what's going on. Don't close your eyes. Commit yourself to the journey without advertising and say, hey, I'm on a journey. Hey, I'm reading this new book. I'm reading Alice Walker. I watched Color Purple again for the third time. I know what Juneteenth is. I know what Black History is. Commit yourself to the journey of learning. Commit yourself to the journey of growing without always advertising it. In the notes of this episode, there's a link so that people can register for my nonprofit's course in U.S. Black History. It's called Black History for a New Day. We actually have put it on an online platform. It begins in early September, and people anywhere in the world can take it. There's a link on this, but this is what you've got to do. I'll give you an example of what I mean by the deer in the headlights, and this concept of dining and then ditching the responsibility. I had a friend, I was on a board of an organization that he worked for, and really liked the cross-cultural discussions. He was sort of a philosophical guy, a smart guy, good writer, and we'd often, talk about life. And as he started learning more about life through my lens, and this was, a long time ago, so this predates my podcast, my Justified Anger work, my Justified Anger article, our Black History courses. I was just beginning to voice just more of what I was experiencing. And he was an older gentleman, and he started crying while we were having lunch or a drink or something. And he just said, "It's too hard." And I was thinking, yeah, it is. It is. Wait, what do you mean? What's too hard? He said, "This is too much. I don't want to think about racist presidents. I don't want to think about how Black people got their European names through slavery, through rape. I don't want to think about the racist heroes, American heroes whose schools are named after, cities are named after. I don't want to think about that. It's too hard. I don't want to reteach my children. He just started crying. And I just thought, this is a trip. I mean, I'm having to walk up in these schools that are named after these racist presidents. I'm having to deal with these issues every day. I'm having to be taught true history while another one that's not so real is being presented to me. I'm having to navigate these worlds now knowing that they've caused microaggressions and stress, that we now have medical science to prove that it has shortened and continues to shorten the lifespan of Black people and people of color. I'm dealing with this through hypertension and other degenerative diseases and the stress because of always code shifting and code switching and all of this. And he's crying because he doesn't want to rethink America. He doesn't want to rethink himself. He doesn't want to rethink his contributions. He doesn't want to rethink his privilege. Now, he doesn't have to do that. He really doesn't. That's a benefit of white privilege, that you don't have to do that. But damn it, don't call yourself an ally and my friend and you don't want to do that. You can easily not look at those things. Many people don't. And I don't consider those people friends. Friends are people I share myself with. I give myself to. We have a great exchange. Our children probably call each other uncle or aunt or cousin or whatever the family structure is that we use lovingly with each other. Those are my friends. But you can't be my friend and go and see racism happening in business and subcontracting and grant making and come back and tell me, you know what they say when you're not in the room, and then not challenge it and then say you're my friend. You don't get that benefit. And so when I think about my friend Jeff, who started crying because it was just way too much, I realized at that point, I can't do this anymore. That was the beginning of the end, because things were beginning to shift. And in addition to struggling with the pressures of all of the places where I was integrating the world and organizations and faith communities and neighborhoods, that I had to now take care of a grown ass man who was, crying because he didn't feel like facing all of that. I stopped getting together. We stopped emailing. That became work and not friendship. Because then I inadvertently became his rubber stamp, where I was able to prove to him through this new kind of proximity, through being friends with him, that somehow he was not a part of the problem. Somehow he was above the problem. Somehow he did not benefit from the problem. Those schools that he was crying over, that he didn't want to acknowledge their history, are schools that he and his family were educated in. And it was through those schools that he got his education to get into college. And some of them, depending if they're Ivy League, like some of the Ivy League schools, they weren't built with slave dollars, but they were built with slave hands. Or they were built by rich people whose hands were clean because their slaves did the work. And yeah, they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, but their bootstraps were their slave quarters. He didn't want to look at how he had gotten where he was, so he wanted to ditch after dining. Well, if you ditch after dining with me one time, because I've got a reputation and I don't believe in ditching and dining because that's stealing and I don't believe in stealing, I'm not going to eat with you anymore. And so that was the last time I ditched and dined with him, because you can't ditch and dine with me because, one, you're not going to go to jail. I'm going to get caught and it's going to be my name in the paper and not yours. So I want you to think about that as you're trying to figure out, what can I do? I've got Black friends, I've got Black relatives, and maybe you don't want to talk about it because you think it's going to make them sad. Guess what? We're already sad. Well, it's going to make people upset. They're already upset. But what you can do, these pointers aren't just what you can say, they're what you can do. You can commit to your own journey without advertising you're on that journey.
This is Jeremy Holiday, a producer here on the Black Like Me podcast, and we have a favor to ask.
That's right, Jeremy. This is Eli Steenlich, also part of the Black Like Me production team. We're working on a new episode for the podcast, and we need your help.
The working title of the episode is Inquiring White Minds Want to Know.
Yeah, we recognize that the Black Like Me podcast has created a special space for cross-cultural understanding, and we are looking to expand that in a new direction.
Specifically, we are interested in your questions. Is there anything you've really wanted to ask as a white person, a non-black person, but just haven't? Now is your opportunity. Send Dr. G your questions. You can send them to our podcast email address, which is blacklikemepodcast@gmail.com. That's blacklikemepodcast, one word, @gmail.com. This will also be in the show notes.
We would love it if you would record yourself saying your question so we could use it on the show.
Some example questions are like, how do you feel about the term woke?
And do you talk to white guests differently than you talk to your black guests?
What do you think when you see a young black man sagging his pants super low?
What is your reaction when you see a white person singing or rapping along to something like hip-hop or really getting into it, and they're taking on an obviously black voice or dance moves?
Or what is your reaction when a really motivated white person new to the struggle comes up to you and asks you how they can help to change the world?
Or even something more serious like, what is it like to watch people become focused on a tragedy like the Buffalo shooting, and then another day they move on to something new?
Whatever the question, drop us a line and let us know at blacklikemepodcast@gmail.com.
You can write it, you can record it, just send it our way, and please include your name and location so we can give you a proper credit on the podcast.
Thanks in advance for helping us create what we think will be a really interesting and informative episode.
The third thing that I want to talk about is, without using an accusatory tone, here's something that white friends, white allies, white people who love black people and want to stand in solidarity, without using an accusatory tone, ask an older relative or an associate, ask them this: why wasn't there more done in your spheres of influence to address racism, whether that was in your communities, your neighborhoods, associations you belong with, the Elks Club, businesses, companies, faith communities? Why do you think it only went so far? Why did your generation have this perception that things were better when in fact they weren't? And why didn't you recognize it? And why didn't you do anything about it? And are you surprised that we are here today? Ask them, period. Listen, period. And learn. Again, I don't need you or want you using an accusatory tone. You're not trying to get grandpa all riled up and get told. That's not what I'm trying to do. But it is very interesting because we sometimes think our parents and grandparents didn't think about race. Yes, they did. Their teachers didn't think about race. Yes, they did, because America's all about race. America is America because Europe sent explorers to America to discover a land that was occupied by folks who were native to this land. They were American Indians. They were native Indians. They lived here. They didn't come here on boats. They weren't sent here by the Queen, the Crown, the Vatican. They were here. So everything about America, even how it was named, because you must understand that the native groups that were here did not call themselves American, because why would you live in North America and name yourself after Amerigo Vespucci? Why? It was called something else, but it was not called the United States of America. Even the naming of it gives homage to those who authorize and finance the exploration, the expeditions of taking this land and raping its people and killing its people and then populating it with other people who would help to till the land and make America into a super power. And so, yeah, people have thought about race, and the power of racism is that you don't even have to say race or them or darkies to be talking about race. When you talk about money, you're talking about race. When you're talking about wealth, you're talking about race. When you're talking about education, when you're talking about home ownership, you're talking about race. Because as America began to develop, America made rules on who could benefit from those opportunities and who couldn't. And guess what the dividing line is? Guess what the determining factor was? Race. Ding, 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 ding. You got it. Ask older folks. Where were they? What did they see? What did they think? And just listen and learn. Fourth thing, the next thing that you can do as you see this world changing and you want to stand in solidarity. Again, some of you, you're just learning. You're just a fly on the wall. But there are others who listen to this. You are in relationships with Black people. Maybe you're married to someone Black. Maybe you've adopted someone Black. Maybe you live next door to someone Black. Maybe you work for someone Black. Maybe you just hired someone Black. And so and you want to do something because not just because it's on the news, but because it's in the lives of someone you care about. These are things you can do. This fourth thing, ask employers, ask faith leaders where you attend, ask your children's educational center leaders for more education. If you work someplace and you live in a very pluralistic community, let's just say DC, Baltimore, Atlanta, and there are not a lot of diversity, it's pretty homogenous, predominantly white, you should bring it up or could bring it up. Are there some things that we can do that we can learn so that as we begin to diversify our workforce, because I'm sure we will, we can retain the people who come? If you are concerned about your white children going to schools and all the teachers looking like them, and all the employees who look like them, except people in the lunchroom and who maybe are a part of the custodial teams, if you're concerned, ask when you go to the orientation. Ask when you go to these private schools that you're paying for, excuse me, is there a committee that takes a look at curriculum? Because it's very important to us that our children get to read about not the struggles, but the contributions of people who are Black or Native American or from the Latinx community or Asian and Asian American. You can do that. That doesn't make you mean. It doesn't mean that you're a racist or reverse racist. You're paying taxes. You're paying tuition. You can get what it is you want. And so what you can do is ask people who are in positions of power and influence, how can we get more information up in here so that we can begin to understand these issues? This is what people can do who know and love Black people and want to be a part of the solution. The other piece that I want us to think about, the fifth thing is just to be aware of this fact. This is not something you need to do physically, but it's just a concept I want you to hold. I'm naturally an optimistic person. That's just how I'm wired. However, this thing, race relations in America, is going to get worse before it gets better. It pains me to say that. I'm not one of these doomsday people that are like, aha, I told you. It's going to get better because it's going to get worse before it gets better, because people don't want to do these steps that I'm just outlining. They just want it to go away. They want to blink 3 times. They want to turn around 3 times. They want to wish on a star. They want to rub a genie's, what is it, bottle, kettle, whatever genies live in, lamp. But they don't really want to put themselves in harm's way. So that's why I believe that's going to get worse before it gets better. But I want you to remember this. Silent white compliance co-signed racism and discrimination in the United States. Just be aware that silent white compliance, well, I don't want to rock the boat, and I don't want to really speak up, or I don't really want to, I don't want to be perceived a particular way. Listen, white people can be innovative when they really want to be. I was sitting in a restaurant with a colleague, and I saw a white man with a ponytail, with a man bun, stop his car in the middle of a county trunk highway because there were some ducks in the street. And he was shooing them out of the street Other cars were piling up trying to see what was going on. Cars going the opposite direction stopped. These folks got out their cars and picked these ducks up and put them in the median. When they got out of the median, they then walked them across the street to the safer side. I watched them do this for like 15 minutes. I was just astounded. I've never seen people in the black community stop and literally pick up wild birds and then walk them across the street, putting themselves at harm. And so I've seen what white people do when they want to align themselves. I watched a white woman, and my sister's a dog person, so this can happen with black people too, but just indulge me. This woman was walking, and another dog was trying to get frisky with her dog. Another dog was trying to dog hump her dog. And she just yelled out into a park, "Whose dog is this?" And there are a group of, some Latino brothers and sisters who are about half her age. They're like, "Oh, it's our dog." She walked over to the group and lit into them. This is not an unleashed park. This is what this is. You need to get your dog and all this other kind of stuff. And I said, whoever painted this picture that white people are only frail and afraid, they lied to me. That, to me, when she did that, her actions showed that she said, "Oh, freaking A. Y'all are not about to watch your dog, your little dirty dog, hump my pedigree dog. Y'all need to get your dog. Y'all need to get your dog on the leash. Y'all need to." I live across the street from a park. I heard her telling these folks off. And she probably is otherwise quiet. I know I might be generalizing, but I'm just saying, this whole concept of people not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to be an inconvenience, that man stopped traffic on a major road to take 15 minutes. People trying to get to the doctor's appointment. People trying to get to work. That's the road I used to go to the airport. People had places to go, things to do, people to see, but they had to wait that day because brother man was getting the birds out the street. And this young lady who might, I think about people who might be afraid to go speak to a group of people they don't know. She didn't mind going over there and telling them off. She didn't mind setting them straight. So we can rock the boat. Y'all can rock the boat when you think the boat is worth rocking. Y'all can do that. So when it comes to these situations, please don't pretend like there's no recourse, because there is. The reality, folks, is that this stress is killing us. I now am more committed to my podcast than ever before because, one, I have to voice this stuff so that it doesn't sit on me, and I need to give room for other people to voice it with me, and I need to create a platform so that others can listen and understand. But the stress of navigating all of what I'm sharing with you is literally killing black people, literally killing black people. This is proven in our city of Madison, as I have quoted several times on this podcast. The Common Council and the mayor have created a resolution stating that racism is a social determinant of health, that dealing with and navigating all of this stuff in these places and these things actually shortens our lives. But we have the power and the opportunity to make a difference. We have the power and the opportunity. So let's be a part of the change. And so here are 5 things not to do. I told you 5 things to do. Here are 5 things not to do. Don't ask your black friends to peel you a grape and feed you. What do you mean peel me a grape? Peel your own grapes. What I mean is this. Stop assigning black people tasks that they work for you. Tell me what to read. Tell me what to watch. Tell me who to talk to. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to think, and then I'll consume it. Hell no. You'll go figure it out yourselves. Go figure it out. But it'll be so much easier if you did it. No, because you go to the library without anybody going and fetching it for you. You read newspapers. You watch the news. You find ways to do things. I call that peel me a grape. I want to eat. I love grapes. I love green grapes. But if I love them, then eat them. But I shouldn't have to wait for somebody to come and peel me one and feed me one in order to be satisfied and gratified. Stop asking black people and people of color to peel you a grape. When you want to understand the atrocities against Native American people, Google atrocities against Native Americans by white settlers. Bet you'll find a lot of stuff. don't ask them to do this for you. You do this for you. Second thing that you don't ask if things are getting better. If you got to ask, they're not getting better. I have a woman who asked me one time, but Alex, aren't things getting better here in the community? And I know that she's a pilot, and I asked this way: if there were more or enough female pilots, would people need to ask, are things getting better? Or would we, as we walked off the plane or on the plane, be greeted by the female pilot? If there were more or sufficient white women in business, women in business or women who are pilots, would we have to ask men, are things getting better? If you saw a woman flying a plane every other flight you were on, or most of the flights, or a good amount of the flights, you would know it's getting better. You would comment to someone and say, man, I just did 2 legs on vacation and 2 legs back. Half of the pilots were women. You would know. If things were getting better for black people, you wouldn't have to ask, are things getting better for black people? You would see things happening. You would see more black leaders at your job. You'd see more black people in your neighborhoods. Your children would have more black friends. You'd have black people in your own home, around your own dinner table, and you'd be in their homes. You'd know if things were better. Don't ask people that. If you got to ask, you know. Third thing that you don't do, please don't bury your heads in the sand. These things are happening, folks. These things are really happening. Don't bury your head in the sand, because it doesn't make it go away. You can't cover your eyes and say, nah, you don't see me. Fourth thing, don't ignore your own work, because sleepwalkers screw everybody up. Folks who say they're woke, but they're sleepwalking because they're not really awake, are dangerous. Sleepwalkers will open the door and leave it unlocked. Sleepwalkers can hurt themselves. They can break things. Sleepwalkers are dangerous to themselves and others. So please, if you want to be woke, wake the hell up. And if you want to sleep on, boo. But stop talking about being woke and you are snoring, your eyes are just glued shut, and you're drooling on your pillow. Then sleep on. But just acknowledge that you are. But please stop all this woke talk and you're sleepwalking. And the fifth thing, don't waste time arguing and debating with people. Find low-hanging fruit and make some fruit preserves. Don't waste your time trying to change the folks who have been so radicalized and brainwashed. Don't spend time with them. I don't expect you to. Because those of you who feel you're awake, want to be awake, or think you're awake, need to keep rehearsing the script to make sure that you are living and acting like you are woke. But don't waste your time. In my line of work, it's called casting your pearl before swine. If something is precious, don't go trying to argue people, because it's not a debate, folks. This is not a debate convention. This is life. And if people think it's critical race theory and they think all of this kind of stuff and our country's been stolen, don't try to argue with them. I was driving in my community recently. I was on a highway. There was a truck right next to me with a big picture of Donald Trump and then a flag waving behind him. And then in the calligraphy letters that look like the preamble, it says, "We the people." And then it said in like regular letters, "Are tired and we want to take America back." And I took a picture of that. And yeah, don't ask how I took a picture while driving. That wasn't smart. And I posted it and it said, "From who? You're taking this country back from who?" People who have stolen the country are taking it back because they're just so tired of their property being stolen. That is so asinine. That is so backwards. But that's the attitude for what? Half this country? That's who people like Trump speaks to. And it's who he speaks about when he says, let's make this country great again. I'm not going to waste my time debating those people. I'm not going to go and stand in line and go nose to nose and toe to toe with them nuts. When there are people who want to get it because they've married cross-culturally, they've adopted cross-culturally, their relatives have adopted cross-culturally, their relatives have interracial marriages with multiracial children. There are people who really are trying to understand this. Do not waste your time debating with those other folks. Find low-hanging fruit. What can you do now and make fruit preserves? And you got fruit, you know winter's coming, and you don't want it to just rot up on your counter. So do something with what you have so you can continue to eat it, continue to go back to it. That's what I mean by saying preserves. If it's more than what you can handle right now, then can it, preserve it so that you can use it later and share with others. But go for the low-lying fruit. Listen, ditching and dining is an old concept, but it plays itself out in race relations because white people who have benefited from their whiteness and the whiteness of their families and their surnames, who have benefited from because of racism and because of the benefit for those who identify with their whiteness, have been dining sufficiently. I'm just saying, don't ditch it. Don't go and repay every meal that you've ever eaten, because not everyone has ditched every meal. But if you're ditching and not willing to pay for that benefit and pay for that access by drawing close to so-called black friends, by showing your proximity, your care, your interest, what you're doing, if you're not willing to at least acknowledge that I've been benefited and not give it up and not sell your homes and support missions in Africa, I'm not asking you to do that. What I want you to pay is with your acknowledgement. Pull your head out the sand or any place else it may be. Look at what's going on. If you don't want to march or take it to the streets, a lot of people don't, then educate yourselves. Go to a place where you give yourself, your faith communities, your associations, your child's school. And just ask questions. You don't have to accuse them. You don't have to say this school district sucks. It needs an enema. You all are racist. Just ask, how can we get more books by people of color? I've got friends who read books to their children. I would love my children to read them. And not about poor people struggling or how they comb their hair. Just stories like A Snowy Day. My favorite book as a kid, about a black kid who looked like me, who liked to play in the snow just like me. You know what? Little kids like to read books about little kids who are doing stuff like playing in the snow. So feed your child and make sure that your school's feeding your children before they learn that color may be bad or gender may be bad. Make things normalized for your kids before somebody makes it yucky for your kids. No more dining and ditching. You've dined sufficiently, America. Pay up by being a part of the solution. Hey, one thing that you can do right now is, if you have not become a patron of this podcast, come on and become it. Particularly if you listen regularly, particularly if you have listened consistently over the years and you've never thought of, hey, I can contribute $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. I want you to seriously consider it, because even though this may just seem like a podcast, there are costs that are associated, and I want and need to continue to provide this space for me and for you. Come on, take a moment to do that. The other thing that you can do is that whatever platform you use for finding this podcast, you can go there and write a review. Those things help me. The other thing is, you can post the podcast episode on your social media and say, here's a podcast I listen to a lot. Here's an episode you might want to listen to. You know people who want to be allies. Share this episode with them, because it will help them. It will help them a lot. And lastly, if this helps you, is meaningful to you, write us and let us know, because we love to hear that kind of feedback. And we also love it when you say, hey, if you ever had an episode where you just wanted to ask white people what they thought about things, here's something I'd love to give your take on. You can email those questions to us. There's a link below in the notes or the podcast notes with my email address. Just click there and send us questions you'd like for me to address, or maybe things that you think would be helpful for your community to hear me talk about. So these are just things I want you to consider and think about. It's my joy to be your podcast host and to help to be your guide through these concepts and these discussions, these episodes. And I feel better when I get a chance to clear my heart and clear my head and share things that I think are actually useful. I don't want to just regurgitate or vomit on my listeners. I want you all to hear some things that can make you a better part of the solution. All right. Have a great day. As always, we want you to lean in. We want you to listen. We want you to learn. We want you to support. We want you to subscribe. And we want you to share. All right. Let's not allow this to be one way. Let's make this interactive. Can you do that? All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Black like me. Black like me.
Now, I've got some special shout outs to the many talented members of our ever-growing production team. Eli Steenlich, who produces the show and handles all of our social media. Don Thornton, my podcast manager, who keeps things running smoothly and arranges all of my interviews. Jeremy Holiday, who edits the podcast. Corey Saffold, who created this year's theme music, and Marcus Fleming on the vocals. And of course, Jakesha Hunt, who is responsible for our fabulous new podcast merch.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.
Black like me.